Hi, everybody. My name's Jason Klein. I'm the director of P20 Initiatives at Northern Illinois University, and we're excited to kick off our next season of Career Pathways Virtual Trailheads today. And we've got a good one for you today. We are introducing one of our new hosts, or our new host, and we've got a fantastic guest, a Chicagoan, but heavily involved with this product, which may be familiar to some of you. So, Jumoke, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and take it from here?
Thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone. My name is Ade Jumoke Olopade. I am an international student here at Northern Illinois University, where I'm working on my master's degree in public health with a specialization in health promotion. As a public health student, I understand the importance of education, environment, and socioeconomic status of an individual and their health, which is why P20 Network does a lot to make sure that every person, not just in Illinois, and people all over the world have access to the resources and education they need to make the best choices in their career. At this point, I'm going to let Miles tell us a little bit about himself. Over to you, Miles.
All right. Hello, everyone. So my name is Miles Robinson. I am a QA test analyst 2, or senior QA analyst at Facebook Oculus. I grew up in Chicago. We talked about this a little earlier. I went to Whitney Young. I graduated from a school called Pacific Union College with a degree in communications with an emphasis in pre-law. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. It's not exactly the field I ended up in, but it was still extremely useful, that degree in particular. We can probably get into that a little later, but yeah, other than career-wise, I am also a competitive fencer. I have fenced in Division 1, 2, and 3. I was in the Bay Area circuit for a long time. I was actually a coach at Napa Valley Fencing Academy for 2 years. I'm a martial artist, been practicing martial arts for over 20 years. And that's just, those are my top things, but a lot of other interests too. Love video games. That also kind of ties into the technical aspect of things. But yeah, that's the short intro for me. So.
Awesome. All right, thank you. I'll go ahead to my questions right away. So tell us a little bit about your job title and the organization you work with.
Sure. So, well, the organization I work for is Facebook. For those that don't know, Facebook is one of the leading social media companies on the planet. And Oculus is a virtual reality company that was acquired by Facebook, I believe in 2013. So when you think Oculus, though, it is part of Facebook. So that's the organization. With regards to Oculus, we are doing some of the most innovative things. The headsets and everything we're working with, the software, it's incredible stuff. My particular title as a QA test analyst, QA stands for quality assurance, by the way. So in the world of quality assurance with regard to software, it's part of the entire what's called software development lifecycle. So there's a whole process, and being QA means you're part of that process. So that's my title, though.
Sounds very interesting. So my next question will be, tell us a little bit about what a typical day is for you at work. I bet it's different from like now and before pandemic. So if you could walk us through both situations, that'd be good.
Sure. So yeah, typical day typical day in the world, especially, okay, so in general, a typical day for a QA test analyst like myself would involve, I am what's called on call and in charge of certain pillars of the development process. So I'll receive bugs, or what we call tasks. So somebody, triage will find a bug or something that comes to me. My job is to investigate. That's if we were going to categorize QA in software, one word, it would be investigating, right? And an analysis in this sense too. So I investigate the bugs, make sure that everything is, they have to be actionable, send it back to engineering. So I work really closely with the engineering team, and we make sure that the product is of the highest quality while we're doing that. So in general, though, work from home, there really isn't huge differences, honestly, just because, everything that we do is, Facebook has like incredible infrastructure, including their IT infrastructure. So that means everything I was doing at MPK, which is the physical location, everything I was doing at MPK, I've been able to do at home. I've got I have 3 laptops. I got a work phone. I have like 6 devices in there, all sorts of stuff, And so if there's anything new, they ship us the devices and we can work from home. Working at MPK, the major differences are that, on the daily, I get to interact with people physically. Mm-hmm. So it's certainly a little easier to communicate in that sense. Working from home online, we have all the tools to communicate, but there's a big difference when you actually walk up on somebody and say, hey, how does this thing work, versus when you send them a message, right? Like it's a little different. So, but yeah.
Yes, I'm sure everyone can definitely relate to that. So what's the most interesting or exciting part of your job?
So I find a lot of things really exciting about my job. And in particular, one of the most interesting things is being able to work on these products that are revolutionary technology, right? So you get to work on these products from the ground up, which is super exciting. And from the QA standpoint, you can think of the engineers, like these are the people that are building it. So they're creating the building blocks using code. And on the QA side, what we do is we work really closely with them. And so they'll give us, it may not even be a completed build. It could be some portion of that. And it's our job to test, right? So we're the ones that go through all these complicated sort of scientific methods of testing things, right? And ensuring that things work or they don't work or whatever's supposed to happen based on based on what the device is supposed to do. And so we go back and forth with them. And in honesty, the most fun parts for me are when it gets really difficult. When we have these times, because Facebook, just the culture there, we move really quickly. The timelines are pretty intense. But I find that really fun. It's challenging because it means I get to, when there's pressure and they say, okay, TPMs are saying we have to launch this product, in like 2 months. And we have to figure this stuff out. So that's the most fun part, is figuring out solutions to these really, really tough problems. So
can I jump in and ask a couple quick follow-up questions there? Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So first of all, what's the TPM?
Oh, sorry. TPM stands for Technical Project Manager.
Cool. And so there's multiple TPMs around Oculus, or there's just one for like the headset itself?
No. Yeah, there's lots of TPMs, there's lots of PMs, which are program managers or product managers. There's lots of leads. It's a very robust organization because we have so many different aspects, right? Like you divide it up into features and hardware and all that.
So then here's another question. So the software starts as nothing, someone's got to start coding it from the ground up, essentially. And so we've got these programmers that are doing that coding. And then you're somewhere here in the middle. And eventually there's either software or hardware that's delivered to a consumer. Now, so I'm painting that picture very broadly. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people who are going to watch this who are thinking about their careers, but thinking about right now as a 15, 16, 17, or 18-year-old, it would be cool if I could beta test stuff on here. At what point in the development process does it head outside of Facebook itself? And do you have any interaction with either those people directly or the feedback that comes back from someone outside of Facebook? Like, what does that look like? Again, because there's people watching this going, man, can I test this stuff too? That's question number one. I'll have a follow-up, but go ahead.
Sure. Yes. So to answer that first part of that, yes, I do communicate with. And we have a very robust what we call dog fooding, what you're describing, which is or play testing, right? So when we have like a beta stage piece of software, we have an entire internal process at Facebook for employees and people to test it themselves. And then of course there are, closed betas for the public. Those are a little bit more, that could be an individual developer. Like we're partnered too with all these different developers for the actual content. And so they can have different betas. In fact, I was just part of a beta for a game that just launched, a really big Population 1. It's the big, the new Battle Royale game. So I was part of the development process for that, the QA process, almost from the beginning there. And then to tag on to what you were saying too, with regard to QA, the position that we're in the software development lifecycle, you can think of, because you're right, it starts with someone has an idea, right? They come up with, there's an inception point, right? Someone goes, okay, this sounds like a really cool idea, right? And those are usually the product people, and present it to stakeholders, and we go through that whole process. Engineers get to work. QA is on the sort of tail end of that, right? So engineers push diffs and code, and then we check all that and we say, okay, this works or it doesn't. Pass it back to them, and you get this sort of cyclical effect as we go through until we get to different stages of the development. We're ready to boom, launch.
Okay, so following up then, I guess I actually have two follow-up questions. First, you talked about the culture at Facebook of being one where things go very, very quickly. Yeah. And so, one of the things I didn't let on is for 10 years, I was in charge of technology in 2 different school districts. So This is something that I've got some background with, and how many tech podcasts do I still listen to each week? In this role, a whole bunch. And so we know it's move fast and break things, right?
Absolutely.
So
yep.
can some of the students watching this will go into organizations where the culture is one of move fast and break things, and others will go into organizations where the culture is, we've got to have this so buttoned up. We're going to double, triple, and quadruple check that every I is dotted and every T is crossed before we do it. And there's different kinds of organizations. So like if I work at a hospital or for an airline, I would prefer that they are not moving fast and breaking things in those organizations, right? At least on certain critical things like, well, we're not going to try a new landing procedure today with passengers on this flight. Yeah. Probably not the best idea. Software, yeah, it's super frustrating for me if the game doesn't work right. Exactly. It's a little glitchy, and it works fine for my buddy who's got the same exact headset I do. So what's the deal there? But no one's getting hurt over that, right? Talk to us about what that culture of that move fast and break things culture, what does that really look like for you? How does that affect you? Do you have plans like where next Thursday or Friday you think you're going to be working on this and something pops up on Wednesday? Like, how does it affect you kind of day to day or week to week?
So one thing for sure is with regard to Facebook, I'll be really candid about this, right? Facebook, you've got to be adaptable. It is one of the most hardcore and fast-paced environments I've ever worked in. Now, me personally, I love it. Like I said, I enjoy that challenge, and I just kind of that works for me really well. Just I think because, and I think a lot of it too has to do with like being a martial artist and these other things, right? Like I can focus really well and do well under pressure. But it's a tough environment. Yeah, I think I've made it sound really fun, which it is, but it is most certainly a very difficult and intense environment, because you're right. Yes, it is. It's very fast paced. And that also means too that, at any point during the day, anything can happen, right? Like especially in particular in my position now, because when I started, actually, I was a regular QA analyst, or the TA1, and then got promoted within a year to TA2. And so the senior QA position you kind of always have to be on watch, because at any point something called a SEV could occur. A SEV is called a severe site alert. These are emergencies. So drop everything you're doing, work on this thing right now because it's a big deal. And then of course we have different priorities to different bugs, and sometimes we get the super crazy high priority bugs that just work on it right now. And sometimes that could be at 7 o'clock at night. You never know. It's you could be off the clock technically, and you have to work on it. So yeah.
And then the last one, and then I'm going to kick it back over. How do you get a job like this? Okay. Like how does that happen?
So one thing my boss and colleague, or my old boss and colleague, he used to say, you don't go to school for VR or AR, right? Like that there's no, right, at least right now, there's no school where you can really learn the stuff necessary. And so what you find is myself and almost all of my colleagues that I know of, they have degrees and backgrounds that are very diverse all over the place, because the skill set necessary to really do something like this, they're more broad critical thinking type skill sets. There's certainly technical knowledge that is really useful, but but it's less of, like go get this degree to get here kind of thing. It's not a straight, narrow path. But I do have information on, I think a good path. It's the path that I took, which was IT prior to this, actually. IT, if you become an IT professional, that a lot of those skills transfer over really well to QA. So.
Okay, I guess my next question would be, what was your transition process like? You know how you mentioned you did your undergrad in pre-law. So how did you move from going to uni to plan to become a lawyer eventually to working in Facebook?
So, okay, so I've always kind of been, I was all over the place when I was a kid. I was like, I want to be an architect. And then at one point I wanted to, do something else. I was always going back and forth. But, and I got my degree in communications with a pre-law emphasis, because yes, I did want to be a lawyer at one point too. But afterwards, it was actually towards the end of my bachelor's degree. So I was finishing up getting my my communications, but the school had just added a software development associates. And so I was really interested in it at that point because, I also have when I was, I think I was like 17 or 18 when I built my first computer. I built my first PC, and I've been building PCs. And so I kind of have that sort of personal background just because I love video games. And I built my PC because I really wanted to play this one game that wouldn't play on the family computer. And I was like, so I had to learn about it on my own. But yeah, when I was in college, though, at the end, I took a little bit of that software development associates before I graduated. And I don't know, I had a taste of it, and I was just like, I want more, So right after that, I went to this programming school that had just popped up in Fremont, so here in the Bay Area, and it's called 42 USA. 42 is a really established computer programming school in France, and the founder of that school, he opened up one in America, and just so happened to open it up right after I graduated. It was in 2016. So in that year, in 2016, when I graduated, that summer, I joined what was called the piscine, which in French stands for swimming pool. And this piscine was was it 4 weeks? It was like 4 weeks, 7 days a week, 10 to 15 hours a day of just nonstop programming. It was immensely difficult. One of the most difficult things I've ever done. But it was invaluable. I learned a whole lot, and the experience was amazing doing that. So that, of course, brought me into programming. We were learning C, so I got a good basis in a good technical basis from there. After that, I actually got accepted into the school. So I went to that 42 programming school for about a year before going down to Southern California and working as an IT professional. And then I worked as an IT professional for a while, for like a year and a half, actually, until I moved back to the Bay and got this job. Now, the actual job application, I had no idea that it was for Oculus when I applied, because they kept it kind of low key. They didn't have that on there. It just said, virtual reality, and these are the skill sets required. And I was like, all right, so I applied and went through the interview process. And then it wasn't until like the second or third interview when the guy goes, have you heard of Oculus? And I'm like, what's heard of Oculus? Like, what? So yeah. And then I succeeded with the rest of it after Facebook. So yeah.
Sounds amazing. I know my cousins, they're completely obsessed with video games, and if you ask them, they probably want to have their own video game and stuff like that. But what is that thing young people don't know about working in this industry that people that actually work in the industry do not enjoy? For lawyers, it could be doing a bunch of research work and things like that. So what is that thing people don't know you think might actually scare some people off? I know it requires a lot of commitment and hard work and adaptability, like you said earlier, but what are other things that people like Jason and I on the outside would not know that you guys don't like about your job?
Sure. I think this is you'll find that this is a little bit different for everybody, but there are some common themes amongst this. One of them is that the software development lifecycle process it's stressful, just across the board. Like it is very stressful because you're always, constrained with very tight deadlines and timelines. There's a lot of pressure on everyone involved. There were times where because that you have the Quest right there, but we just launched the Quest 2. So I was involved in launching the Quest and the Rift S last year, and worked on the Quest 2 from the ground up. Essentially, I worked from prototype to finish. And there are many times along that process where, where engineering is blocked, right? They say, okay, we can't proceed until we get sign off from QA. And sign off from QA can mean sign off from me or sign off from one of my colleagues, right? So, and of course, if we have incorrect validation or we sign it off incorrectly, that's boom, we're in trouble, right? That could be millions of dollars lost, et cetera. So, so that, things like that can be stressful because there's a lot of weight on your shoulders. And then there's all sorts of little things. Programming, I know I've seen in the last, 6-7 years, there's been this push from the industry to kind of, improve STEM in schools and, with programming and say, yeah, try programming this and that, which I think is fantastic. It's great. But I think that there shouldn't really be false advertisement. I've seen, some things that try to make it seem like programming is easy or like, oh, learn how to code in 6 months and then get a software engineering job, right? Like, no, I just don't. I totally disagree with that. Programming is intrinsically something that is difficult, even for people that are naturally more inclined to it. They kind of pick it up a little easier, or they are very good at math, and so it transfers well. It's still a very tough thing, and like you said, it takes a lot of work. It's a long process, and so people shouldn't be trying to do this sort of quick thing. It's the long game. You know what I mean? Take your time with it, learn it, and spend the couple of years necessary to really get proficient. And then before you know it, you'll be working at one of the companies.
So I'm going to jump in with a question there, because you talked about how difficult programming is. And one of the things, again, these tech podcasts I listen to, is someone who is responsible for IT, and especially in a school district where there's a lot of users of it, of all ages, right? From 4 years old through staff members who might be 65 years old. But they're not IT folks, and we know in IT that software is buggy, right? That these huge, enormous companies with billions and billions of dollars still turn out buggy software.
Absolutely.
And they have these incredibly smart people, very dedicated, working for them. It's because of how hard software is.
Yeah.
So thinking about, especially with your fencing and your martial arts background, I mean, I've got some stereotypes in my head based on the people I know who have pursued fencing and martial arts. They've got strong attention to detail. I don't want to necessarily go so far as to call them perfectionists, but how do you work and you're not the programmer, but you're the QA person, which means the bugs are going to get through you too. So everybody along that chain, how do you kind of deal with the fact that you have to know there's some level of imperfection and ongoing need for improvement in everything you put out, and still be proud of your work and feel good about what you're doing? That to me would seem like a challenge in a job like yours.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think this is definitely a perception thing, because you're right. Prior to working in the industry, I think I felt like how a lot of people do. You receive the product and you pay money for it, and then maybe you encounter a bug and you go, what is this? You know what I mean? They couldn't get this right. What? But working in the industry, it changes my whole perception, because I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, you see, you really honestly, you get more empathy for the whole process. You see, the developers and how hard it is for engineers, and how you've got, you could be a brilliant engineer, but you're dealing with code that might be a year old from some employee that left, right? And maybe they had a different programming style, because you can think of writing code like writing style, like how we do with pros. And if you've got a different style, that can be tough to, merge with other people, and so it just gets messy and it's complicated. And that's where QA comes in too, where our part is to, investigate all this and check to make sure we got to do regression testing, all this other, so then when we finally, you go through all that work, and then when we're finally ready to launch, especially I'll say, being at Facebook, I mean, I'm very proud of the products, because you're right. This is any company you go to, they're launching a product with known bugs. Every company, right? They know what's going on. They have their different strategies to deal with that. But there's still a sense of pride, because especially when you work on something from close to inception to end, right? And it's just like, oh, this is amazing, So I have a lot of, I have tears when I see some game or some hardware product from another company release and it just gets received really poorly. I just feel bad for the development team, because I'm like, they poured their heart and soul into that, but it happens sometimes. So, yeah.
Okay, I'll kick in real quick here. So if you were to employ somebody to work on your team, what kind of skills would you be looking for? I know you mentioned some in the course of our conversation, but what particular skills would you definitely want to have in a young person who you're bringing on board your team?
That's a good one. So, okay, if I were personally hiring someone to be on my team and what we do, so I'm on the devices on-site regression team, and I'm in charge of the vision and operating system pillars. I would want someone who is open-minded, very open-minded, someone who is an active and good listener. That's a huge thing. So open-minded, active, good listener, adaptable. Someone who is very good at managing stress. Someone who is very communicative, very unafraid to communicate, unafraid to ask questions, unafraid to make those connections with people. I say these first because I think those are far more important than, say, technical knowledge or other things like that, right? Because technical knowledge, a lot of that can be learned on the job if you have those other skill sets that I mentioned, which is the adaptability and the open-mindedness and critical thinking. These are things too, by the way, that are a lot harder to teach, right? Like, how do you teach somebody critical thinking? How do you teach somebody? This is stuff that has to kind of be developed over time. Anybody technically can learn some of the technical stuff. So those are the things that I would really be looking for, those specific traits. And now, I don't want to downplay the technical stuff. It's always great. It is great to have someone with a lot of technical knowledge. That's super helpful. But so I emphasize the other ones.
I know a lot of young people, including myself, because every single time I'm trying to apply for a job, there's one thing that comes to my mind. I'm a good team player. Is that important in your industry? Do you have to be a good team player?
Absolutely. Without a doubt, yes. And especially in the, when it comes to software development, life cycles, hardware production, all this stuff, and just in general in tech industry, yes, you definitely need to be a team player because there are very few positions where you're going to be on an island, working by yourself. You're going to be working with people you're going to be working with artists, you're going to be working with technical people, you're going to be working with product and stakeholders and all that, right? And you have to be able to communicate effectively between all these different groups, and it's very different types of communication. So yeah, you definitely have to be a team player, without a doubt.
Sounds good. Well, we'll get into the last part of my questions. How would you say that your job has a positive impact on the world in general, the life of young people or people around you?
So for me, it's the product at the end of the day, right? Like when we launch these products, especially, and I'm very passionate about technology in general, and especially about new technology, virtual reality, augmented reality. I think it's incredible, and it has the potential, the capacity to just really change things and bring us into a whole different type of world together. And so just speaking on what we have now, because of course there's a whole lot of stuff, internally that we're working on, but with the Quest 2, for instance, launching that headset it's a beautiful thing. You get on, you see people enjoying this thing, right? And not just enjoying it, not just getting on and playing these games, but you see someone like I saw a video the other day. It was he was a kind of older guy, and he put on the headset for the first time. They put him into Creed, which is a boxing game, and this guy used to be a boxer, and he put on the headset and was just in there, you could not take him out of it, and that's what I love to see is people. The wow factor. When people get into virtual reality for the first time, oftentimes they're just like, how is this possible? What is going on? And then the next step from this, though, is that connectivity. What I found is that multiplayer games in virtual reality, it's like nothing else. It's incredible, right? Like playing multiplayer games on your phone is fun. Playing multiplayer games via a console like PlayStation or Xbox is great, super fun. But in virtual reality, it's different. Because you actually have a physical representation of that person right there, right? You have an avatar that you can speak to, you can pump fists, you can, all that stuff, and so it's closer to it's the closest thing we have to actually hanging out with your friends who are halfway across the world from you. So I think that's a huge thing for me, and of course knowing that that this particular feature or this thing was thanks to my efforts or to my teammates' efforts or because of these engineers. That's the big thing for me. So yeah.
Okay, so this is my last question for you, Miles. What's the culture like at Facebook? If what an international student like myself, as somebody who was in high school, like the son of an immigrant from Africa, decided to pursue a career like yours. Do you think what are the prospects? What chances does this person have?
I think that person's chances are really as high as they want them to be based on their willpower, if that makes sense, right? These jobs, I know they seem very distant and difficult to get to, but they're accessible. You just have to, I mean, it takes drive and willpower. You have to keep pushing. And I'll say too, like, I mean, I've been through so many difficult times, right? Like it was so many setbacks, and like I totally understand the frustration of applying to hundreds of job applications and getting rejected, right? So, but the differing factor is just keep going, right? Keep pushing, keep improving yourself. So you have to keep improving because that's what they say, like the whole investing in yourself. That's a big thing, like every single day, try to do something small, right? If it's learn one new thing before you go to bed. And what happens is cumulatively over time, before you know it, right? In 1 year, I learned a whole new skill, right? And then it makes it much easier to present yourself when it comes to these types of organizations, because for sure, a place like Facebook, Oculus, it's very diverse. I've met people from all over the world there, with very different backgrounds, and so everybody has in common that I found. But when I got to Facebook, I was like, I am surrounded by the sharpest people in the world, right? Facebook is filled to the brim with very, very brilliant people and very hard workers. So, and again, I'm a proponent of, I'm a huge proponent of education. And when it comes to intelligence and education, right, everyone can rise in that sense. It just takes work. That's all. So.
Well, that's all for me.
This was awesome, Miles. Thank you so much for your time. Just to put a fine point on this, just yesterday in a totally unrelated meeting, I was meeting with someone in the career and technical education sector, and they offhand made a comment about, and there's this new software for the Oculus where students who are going to be at home and can't be in the workplace can learn how to weld with the Oculus on. And I think it's another example of the power that technology holds, especially as we're faced with these situations that we're in right now. And, we don't know how long we're going to be in them. But there are people taking your platform and trying to build upon it. And same thing with other platforms, including the web, to give our students opportunities to learn new skills, keeping everybody healthy. And so it's awesome. It's really, really amazing. So thank you for sharing everything you did with us. Congratulations. I'd love to have a whole nother one hearing more about fencing. That would be amazing. One of the high schools I worked at has long had a fencing team, and I know an assistant superintendent who was on it 20 some odd years ago, and I would love to see him fence someday. I think you could take him. I think you could. I think you would definitely beat him.
We'd have to see. Yeah.
With that said, for those of you watching, thank you again for watching. We are excited to be launching many more episodes of Career Pathways Virtual Trailheads. You can subscribe to them right here on our YouTube channel. You can also find each episode has its own blog post on our blog at p20network.niu.edu. And if you have suggestions for new episodes, don't be afraid to connect with us on Twitter and share those ideas. You can also email us at p20network@niu.edu. So, Miles, thanks again.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much, Miles. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And thanks again to everybody for watching.